Hi, I am Anna from sew.lala Patterns and today we're sewing the Lilly bias skirt. Before we head into the sewing process, I have a few short notes on the instructions. I know they are pretty detailed, but when you just follow the steps, you can make sure that you have a successful sew. Cutting on the bias and sewing on the bias is sometimes a little bit tricky as the sides have a tendency to stretch out. So this is why you see both of my pre-cut skirts folded like that. Just make sure that you really do not let the fabric hang freely while sewing before you have finished the sides. As you can see, I have pre-cut two skirts. So the green one will be the classic one without a zipper, just elasticated waist. And then we have this one with an invisible zipper that will be attached. This version is really recommendable for women who have a real difference between waist and their hip measurements compared to the measurement chart given in the instructions. By sewing in and adding the zipper, you have way more space to step into the skirt, and this is something that you might prefer. Even the steps are a little bit more tricky. With the instructions, you can easily follow them along. I also would like to add a short note on the fabric choice. In my instructions, I have written that you have to pick a fluid and really on the bias stretchy fabric. This is important because the sewing pattern itself is quite fitted around the hip. And if you don't have this stretch, it won't drape nicely and also it won't fit nicely. So please make sure, but when you make your fabric choice, that you really have a good stretch on the bias. Right at the beginning of the instructions, when you enter the sewing process, you have this really recommendable tip to stay stitch all edges. You would do this by moving your stitch length to 5, like when you do basting stitches on your machine. And the difference is that with a stay stitching, it's not to hold together different pattern pieces or fabric pieces, but it is simply to prevent your fabric from stretching out. When you go for the zipper version, there's one thing that you need to remember before you start to do the stay stitching and to finish off the side edges. Don't forget to interface the part of your zipper opening. I transferred the zipper mark to the facing as well and pressed it on so to make sure that it's meeting the mark on the fabric and that the fabric does not stretch out. When working with delicate or lightweight fabrics, I prefer to use a microtex needle size 70. This makes sure that you don't have any damages in your seam later on. Also remember to put your stitch length to 5 for the stay stitching. While sewing, remember to place your fabric on the table and not to let it hang down the edge of your table so that it won't stretch out. After you have stay stitched along all edges, the next step will be to finish off the sides. This is done by using either the overlocker or your zigzag on your normal standard sewing machine. For both, if the stitch has the tendency to stretch out your fabric, please make sure that you set your pressure foot pressure to 0, or if you're working with the overlocker, that you put your setting in a way that your fabric will be slightly pushed together while sewing, not stretched out. Some of you might prefer to sew the darts now before you sew the front and back piece together. Just on a short note, I have a small tip for you because mostly fabrics for skirts are shifty fabrics, so they have the tendency to move while sewing. And for darts on the bias, this can be really tricky, so I prefer to give the darts a quick press so that they don't move while sewing. This gives a little bit more structure and stabilization for the process. Also, when you sew the darts, make sure that you end them on the same level so that you have a good view at your bag and that it's not looking wonky. After sewing the darts, you press them towards the side seam, and you probably have noticed that I don't have added stay stitching on the back piece. This is nothing that I did intentionally. I just realized that I didn't do it. As I said at the beginning, it's something that is a tip, so it might help some might feel this is really unnecessary. It really depends on your fabric. This one is quite forgiving. So if you feel like it is needed, do it. If not, you can skip it. But in general, I feel it's something that is helpful for precise results. Pin together front and back, starting at the beginning and one pin at the end and the notch in the center of the seam. And then evenly distribute everything else so that you have the fabric evenly on each part of your side seam. Sew with 1 centimeter seam allowance and press the seams open. For sewing the Lilly skirt with a zipper, you do the same. You will pin together along the sides. You will pin together the front and back along the sides and sew up to the zipper mark on the one side and the other one just the whole side. The remaining zipper opening will be stitched together with the same seam allowance of 1 centimeter, but with a basting stitch. And afterwards you press open the seam allowance on the inside. You would do this for both, either with elastic or with additional zipper. Here's some additional tip for sewing with fabrics on the bias with your normal sewing machine. Make sure that your pressure foot does not stretch out the fabric, as I said previously. So please pre-test, especially for this seam, because this will be a very visible seam for the fit of your garment, to be honest. Make sure that your stitch does not stretch out your fabric while sewing. So please pre-test, don't be lazy. Take this second to make sure your garment will turn out nicely. If you have used a stay stitching or basting stitching at the sides, make sure to remove it now, because we will get to the elastic, but leave it at the hem allowance, please. I will follow the instructions and show you now how to insert the elastic at the waist edge. If you're going for the zipper version, please hop to the minute instructed in the info box. The instructions require a 4 centimeter wide elastic. Make sure that it is a little bit of a sturdy one, not too thin. This will make sure that your skirt, if the fabric possibly brings a little bit of weight with it, stays nicely at your waist area. The measurements for your elastic are your own measurements. I prefer to do it this way so the skirt will really fit your body nicely. You will fold your elastic in half and add 1 centimeter and mark here. The plus 1 centimeter half of your elastic will later on be the back of your skirt. Please make sure to note this down and to not forget it, and to remember it when you pin your elastic to the waist edge. You will join the ends without overlap. This is a little bit unusual, but you don't want a bulky elastic under your lightweight and delicate fabric. That's why I decided to do it this way. Also, this will go into the side seam area, so you don't want it to be bulky. Make sure that you place the ends right next to each other and sew together with a wide zigzag. Also make sure that if you have a little bit of fraying like I have here, to carefully burn it down so that it does not fray. After joining the two ends of your elastic, put it on top with a back mark, which is actually a side seam mark, but you will see this in a second, and mark the quarters. Place the skirt with the right side facing the elastic inside the elastic, and make sure that you have the elastic seam on one side seam, then the first mark that you made on the elastic that will mark where the back and the front of your skirt needs to be placed, and that you match the quarter notches with the center front and center back notches. Also, please, as I said, pay attention. The slightly longer side of the elastic will be placed at the back of your skirt. Distribute the fabric evenly at the elastic and sew with a stretchy stitch with 0.7 centimeters seam allowance. After attaching the elastic to the skirt, you will press the fabric away from the elastic, fold it over the elastic edge, so to say the seam allowance, press it nicely, and then, so that the elastic and the fabric will not separate again, but stay in place, you will stitch in the ditch, which means that exactly in the seam line, you will stitch the elastic to the fabric for about 2 or 3 centimeters. You will do that at the back darts and at the sides. You will do this at the back darts and at the side seams. When you're sewing the Lilly skirt with the invisible zipper, make sure that it has at least the 18 centimeters length. It can be longer, mine is quite long. It's no problem to just shorten it. Just make sure that it has at least the 18 centimeters, so your zipper won't pull together the fabric in the end. I have transferred all notches and markings that have been on the fusible anyway to the front of the seam allowance so that I can really match them with the zipper. As I have a special invisible zipper foot that I will use in this tutorial, if you don't have one, please make sure to follow the steps accordingly as given in the instructions and make the changes as instructed for people who don't have this special pressure foot. You will place the invisible zipper with the teeth looking at you. This is the special thing about the invisible zipper, that on the right side of the zipper you don't see the teeth actually. So you will place it with the back looking at you, so you can see the teeth. Also, the back of the slider is facing you, and you will place it along the basted side seam zipper opening. Make sure that you really place the center of your zipper teeth. You can see the small line here, exactly on top of the basting seam. Make sure that you only pin it to the seam allowance and not to the skirt itself. After pinning the zipper to your seam allowance, make sure that you hand baste it so that it won't shift or move while sewing it. As soon as you finish basting, you can remove the basting stitches that keep together the zipper opening so that you will be able to open the zipper for sewing it in more easily. After sewing both sides of the zipper, you can see here how nicely it turned out. You remove the basting stitches, move the slider again up, close the zipper and give yourself a pat on the shoulder because this was not that easy and you did so well. If you went for a way too long zipper like I did, now's the time to shorten it. Just cut it off 1 or 2 centimeters below the zipper end where your seam ends, and don't forget to slightly burn the edges so that it won't fray. Cut your elastic according to your individual measurements on page 3 and fold it in half. In this step, you will make sure to mark the side mark. So this one will go to the side seam later on. You will place it at half the elastic plus 1 centimeter. Make sure to also mark the seam allowance at the ends, 1 centimeter seam allowance, and quarter it by placing the seam allowance and side seam mark on top and adding the quarter mark. Do the same for the other. If you stay stitched the waist edge, make sure to remove it now, and to pin the elastic, make sure to have the longer half at the back of your skirt. Pin it to the right side of your fabric. Make sure all notches and marks match and evenly distribute the fabric in between. For evenly distributing the fabric to the elastic, it might be necessary to slightly stretch the elastic. Just make sure that you don't stretch the fabric as well. As soon as you finish pinning the fabric to the elastic and evenly distributed the fabric to the elastic, you will sew with a stretchy stitch of your choice, preferably the overlocker or overlocker stitch on your normal machine or a white zigzag. Just make sure it's really stretchy as you want to have it flexible at the waist. The seam allowance here is 0.7 centimeters. Press the fabric away from the elastic and press it over the edge that the seam allowance of the elastic creates. Flip the elastic over to the right side of your fabric using the pressed folding edge as a marker. It really needs to go up to the end of the seam allowance, to the edge, and pin together elastic and seam allowance with 1 centimeter seam allowance as well. Make sure to have this corner and this fold at the corner really neatly, because otherwise you won't be able to have a nice corner when you turn it inside out again, where you can attach your hook and eye. Also make sure to put the zipper end out of the way so that it won't be seen after flipping it inside out at the end. So with 0.9 centimeters seam allowance right next to your previous seam. Let your skirt hang at least for 24 hours. By cutting in the bias, your skirt can gain length at the center. So if you want an even hemline, please let it hang and sit for 24 hours at least, and then adjust the hemline to your needs. If your hemline did not change while hanging out, you can just proceed to the next step and sew the hem. If your hemline stretched out and changed, you will need to adjust to make it even with the same distance from the floor so that it does not look wonky. This can easily be done by measuring the same distance with the measuring tool from the bottom floor. It's easiest if you have someone who helps you and just pin the right distance. You can also just put your skirt on your dress form and do it yourself, or use one of those fancy chalk tools that can mark the hem all around you while you're wearing the skirt. Just make sure it sits nicely into your waist and that you move slow enough to get the marks at the right place. When the hemline is as desired, you can begin to sew the hem. You will fold it 1 centimeter to the inside, press it nicely, and then you will sew with 3 millimeter distance from the folding edge. Cut away the excess fabric. Be sure not to hurt the seam. Then you fold over to the inside 0.5 centimeter and stitch exactly on the previous seam. This way you will have a delicate rolled hem that will finish off your bias skirt nicely. If you are a little bit intimidated by keeping it 3 millimeter from the folding edge, I just place it under my pressure foot, the standard one, and then I will just sew, but with the fabric not at the foot edge, but at the right corner of the inside corner of my pressure foot. If you feel like your fabric is stretching out, please reduce the pressure foot pressure to 0.